you'd like to bring something that you have marked, you're welcome to do that, but the questions are available up here. You will be able to see the person who is immediately following you, and you can go ahead and say into the microphone the person who's coming next. If you don't, that's fine. They will come up and introduce themselves as well. But when you come to the microphone, make sure you state your name and the area that you support, so that everyone who's listening on the web has a chance to hear that. Thank you so much for all of you being here bright and early on Monday morning for this process. We are very excited. We will be reviewing 3 applicants for charter schools today, as you all know, and I know you put in countless hours to evaluate them, to give your feedback, and you're ready to ask some great questions to our applicants today. So thank you so much, and I think we are just about ready to start. So because we are on the webcam, I think I'll start here so there's a webcam so they can see me. So please, I'm sorry, you'll see my back for just a second while we get started. Good morning. We are ready to start the charter school application cycle capacity interviews, and we have our first applicant, Dreamers Technical Academy, on board for their capacity interview questions from district staff. As you can see from our agenda today, we have a busy day on tap with Dreamers Technical Academy from 8:30 to 10:30. We'll have a break for a restroom and some quick snacks. Then we'll start up again at 10:45 to 12:45 with Southeast Volusia School of Science and Technology. We have a lunch break built in, and then our afternoon will conclude at 2 to 4 with East Coast Charter School. My name is Kelly Amy, and I am the Manager of Strategic Partnerships, and I will be facilitating our capacity interviews for the day. So without further ado, I'd like to call our applicant team up to the dais and go ahead and have them introduce themselves and get ready for our questioning to begin. Thank you so much. You may introduce yourselves at any time as soon as you're settled, and we'll get started. Thank you.
1 second. My name is Ron Renna, and I'm the consultant for Dreamers Technical Academy.
Good morning. My name is Christine Mentis, and I also serve as a consultant for Dreamers Technical Academy.
Good morning. I'm Keith Spence with School Financial. I assisted in preparing the budget for Dreamers Academy.
Excellent. Good morning. I would also like to remind everyone that we're sticking to a 2-hour time limit for our interviews this morning, so we'll be asking our questions accordingly within that time frame. However, if we do need to go over a little bit to ask all of the questions, we may do that. So that is our structure for today. In the first section, mission, guiding principles, and purpose, we have no questions from the district. Our first set of questions comes in section 2, target population and student body.
Good morning. I'm Eric Shelsky with the Planning Department. On page 11, paragraph 4, you mentioned various institutions that you have identified as serving the target population. That would be the students that have dropped out or are in danger of dropping out. But you don't mention which organizations? I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
We met with Daytona One, a couple of gentlemen there. We've talked about different businesses that they were associated with as far as construction and other type of businesses. We met with, everything went blank. Chris will be here in a little bit. They're having, some board members are coming, there's 4 of them, and they texted they're having some trouble with traffic. But they should remember the name of the lady that we met with and her organization. I think it might have been in here actually, but off the top of my head I don't recall her name. And then one of our board members has been meeting with different people in the area, so when he gets here he can tell you what those are.
Okay, so my follow-up was you mentioned that you would work with guidance, Volusia County Schools guidance departments, and the juvenile judge in the county in that same paragraph, and I wanted to know what other organizations, and you've stated Daytona One, but if they could elaborate later, that would be helpful. Second question well, I guess the third question on section 2. Where in the startup plan do you reflect this identification of your target group and recruiting of the target group? It's page 118 is the beginning of the startup plan.
118. On page 118, it refers to meeting with interest parties in Volusia. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
And it says November 2019 through February 2020. I'm not sure, is that what you're asking? When do we plan on meeting with the interested parties? Yes,
I was trying to make sure I understood you're trying to meet with these organizations at an earlier time frame.
Yes,
so,
yes,
yeah.
Most definitely. And,
yeah.
and it's really important. Last year, we met with these people also, and we talked about this, and then we weren't approved. We didn't get a chance to open. So the real crux of the issue as far as meeting with the interested parties is based on when we get approval from the school board. Because for us to sit and talk for different organizations, we're going to have kids, can you find jobs for them, things like that, is useless at this time until we know that we're going to open. So once the application has been approved, that's why we put down November. We should know by then for sure. We'll focus more on meeting with the interested parties and looking for those connections, those business connections that we'll need to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you. The next is section 3. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Mr. Milholland, will you please come forward with questions about educational program design and curriculum?
Good morning. My name is Robert Milholland. I'm the curriculum specialist for secondary social studies and advanced programs, and I'll be representing the core areas. On page 17, it lists the daily schedule, and it lists the first part is ending at 12:30. Should this 12:30 a.m. Should this be 12:30 p.m.?
Oh, thank you.
Okay, just want to make sure. It's not after midnight.
That's a good catch.
On page 21, are you referring to FSA levels or Lexile levels for the reading
FSA
support?
level 2.
FSA. And also on page 21, it lists Read 180 as supporting struggling readers. Where is this program included in the budget?
It's up to you, Keith. Do we have that in our budget?
Okay, we using some matrix of standard schools, we actually have included some contracted services of 500 per student located in the 5100 section, or in the 5200 section, that we should be able to encompass this amount.
Okay. And on page 22, the Algebra 2 EOC is no longer state mandated, just as a point of reference. On page 27, Science Fusion is referenced, which is a K through 8 program. Will Science Fusion be used in your 9 through 12 science program?
No, we will be using Apex to support science instruction for our 9 through 12.
Okay. And also on page 27, Write Out Loud is referenced, which is a K-5 program.
No. We'll not be using that.
Are you going to be using Apex instead?
We'll be using Apex for all of our classes, yes.
Okay. On page 31, HOPE and the HOPE variation are listed as student options. HOPE requires PE plus health certifications. The HOPE variation requires PE certification. The options in Apex include personal fitness for a half credit or HOPE for 1 year. Page 38 states that you will use the district student progression plan to include a half credit of physical education and 1/2 credit of personal fitness. So what is the actual grad plan for your students?
Well, we have to make sure that the Apex class in health is approved by the state. I don't know that that one is, but I know that HOPE is. And so if we determine that the Apex health class cannot be used as half a credit, then we'll go with HOPE for the whole year to get the full credit.
Okay.
We have to use what's approved by the state, and right now HOPE is approved.
Okay. And on page 34 and 35, it lists your achievement goals, but there's not a goal set for social studies addressing the U.S. history EOC. Is there a reason for that?
U.S. history EOC. Where's my search tool here?
We would need to have a social studies goal to address that, because that's a that's a requirement for our high school students to be able to take the U.S. history EOC. So we would definitely have a achievement goal for that as well, as that is part of their academic requirements.
Okay. Would it be similar to the science goal?
It'll be similar to the science goal as well.
Okay. On page 122, you list the Apex course offerings, but the corresponding FLDOE course is not listed. Do you know what the corresponding DOE courses are for those Apex courses? For example, where in your application does it indicate that Apex English 9 is equivalent to English 1? Another example would be what DOE course is art appreciation in Apex equivalent to?
I'm still working on the last question. U.S. history EOC is mentioned on page 39, so we do refer to that, that we're going to be doing that. Is that 1 credit of world history? Yeah, so that's on page 39.
Right.
So now back to your next question.
There's not a correlation between the Apex courses and the DOE courses.
And why would there need to be? If Apex is approved by the state of Florida to teach, let's say, 9th grade English, and we're using the 9th grade English curriculum from Apex, I don't understand what the issue is.
Okay, so if you're assuming English 9 in Apex is equivalent to English 1 in DOE, what would art appreciation Apex be equivalent to?
Oh, I don't know. I would have to check and see. I'd have to look at that curriculum and see how it aligns with the curriculums that are available.
Okay. The next question, it deals with page 548 in the budget.
548.
And the question is, what is the budget for purchasing textbooks, equipment, and supplies for the art appreciation and music appreciation courses? And that references back to page 31 where those two courses are listed.
Okay, we do not have individual lines for music or the art program, but what we do have is some for supplies, textbooks, furniture, and equipment, all underneath under instruction, and we use some standards that we've used for other schools, and it's a blend of $50 per student and 75% per classroom teachers, and then for textbooks we use a 75 per new student and 750 for returning students. So and then obviously there's another formula math exercise that goes through for furniture and equipment, where every new classroom teachers is at $1,500 and then returning classroom teachers at $150. So the assumption of the budget would be that those supplies would be handled underneath those sections of the budget.
And that would include musical instruments?
Right.
Okay. In that, textbooks and appreciation. Okay, that's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our board members are here. If we want to go back to that one question.
That was it.
Yeah, would you each stand up and introduce yourself?
Does he want to stand here? Mr. Milholland, would you like to step?
You had an additional question, I believe that they couldn't answer.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
So perhaps we just want to have it up here.
Okay.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Latoya Jackson, Union Secretary.
Gerald Cox, board.
Yeah. Mr. Cox, they asked a question about who have we been talking to in the community, and I understand from Chris that you have made some connections and talked to different businesses and people in the community about the school. Can you share that with them?
One being, we reached out to, about the Sickle Cell Foundation that's here. They've been a big proponent of it. Lydia Williams, she was the past, president and CEO of it. She is talking on our behalf with new current standing members that are running it now. We've also talked with Alpha Sorority Incorporated. One of their members has addressed the need for it with us, as well as giving their support for it in the community.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a clarifying question here?
Yeah.
With the various institutions that you were collaborating with is different than the various institutions that you mentioned as the target as serving the target population. I was more interested in hearing about where you plan to reach out to your students.
Okay, so it's the type of students that we're trying to reach are students that are in the Daytona area, in that population. And as you know, the type of students that we're looking for, kids are 2 years behind. So those are the type of students that we're trying to reach. So the population has got to be those students that are in the Daytona area, the Daytona Beach area.
Do you remember the name of the lady we met with?
Ida Wright.
Ida Wright, and what was her organization?
Oh, are you talking about? No, Ida Wright is on the board.
No, we're talking about. Yeah, I went blank too.
I have her name. I'll find her name. But we did meet with. Yeah, she works with Volusia County as well.
Yeah.
She works in the school system with you guys.
With the CAPE program.
With the CAPE program.
Yeah.
But I'll get her name for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Vince Roshink with CTE, and I have a few questions regarding CTE, and my questions regard page 8. In reference to meetings with business in the area, not sure of what trades to offer instruction on. On that last paragraph on page 8, you mentioned hospitality management, medical assistant, gaming, designing apps, networking, and other technology-related industries, courses that you'd like to offer. So my question is, would you have several CTE teachers that are certified to teach in these areas, or are you looking at one teacher delivering the content?
A lot of what we do depends on the interest, where we're located. If we're located in Daytona Beach, then it would be more of a hospitality. If we're in DeLand, it might be more of something different. And a lot depends on the facility. If we have a big facility where we can offer woodworking or something like that, that would determine the classes that we offer. Right now, our mindset is we would offer classes that do not require a large facility to do construction or things that would cost a lot of money. So hospitality, courses on computers and things like that would be within our budget, would be contained in the rooms that we have. The teachers that we would hire would be certified, and we'd go through the county to certify anyone who doesn't have a state certification in that area, because in these classes you don't always find a certification for electrician or electrical. And so we'd go through the process of making sure that person meets the requirement of the district for getting a local certification. Okay?
So you've listed these multiple CTE courses. The courses that you're speaking of, these are the Apex CTE courses?
No. Apex courses just offer the basic curriculum. These CTE courses would be courses that would be aligned with the state and their classes.
Okay. Apex actually does. They have 10 courses. I didn't know if you're using Apex or not.
Not for those classes, no.
Okay.
Just for the academics.
Okay, thank you. So the next page, page 9, and then also referencing on, depending on, I apologize, I put 566 to 571 if you open it directly, but if you save it to your computer, it would start at page 550. So somewhere around there you have all the CAPE industry certifications, and you link the CAPE industry certification website. So you had just mentioned some of these courses, but have you thought, or which were you planning to offer as far as certifications are concerned?
The board at this time has not decided which ones we're going to offer. Like I said, it depends on where we're located and the interests of the student body. And once we get the principal in place and we have started our enrollment and we can do some surveys to find out what are the interests of the students, that's when we'll determine which classes we'll offer and which certifications.
Okay. The last question I had, Mr. Milholland, I think you had, when he addressed some of his questions, I think you had answered it, because I had wrote that listed are some of the Apex CT courses. That is in your plan. There are a listing of them. I didn't know if you... They're on there.
Okay.
So it says that you're going to offer Apex CTE courses. That's why I was mistaken.
Again, a lot depends if we offer them or not. It'll depend on the principal and the board when we open, when we get ready to open, when we set our curriculum before school opens and set our classes. A lot will depend on whether or not we can get those classes from Apex for free or how much extra it might cost us, or would it be easier to have a certified teacher on staff and pay that teacher on staff to fulfill the requirements of the course. Apex has a system where we don't have to have a certified teacher on site. They have certified teachers that have been approved by the state to teach those classes online electronically. My experience of the school that I oversee in Fort Myers, which is the exact same kind of school, it's always better to have a person on site to go over this. We did cosmetology, we did electrical, we do a lot of electrical down there, and having a person working with the kids hands-on makes it a whole lot better than online. So my personal opinion and my recommendation to the board would be to find somebody locally that can be actually there with the kids, teaching the class, following the curriculum as outlined by the state. To me, that would be better than using the Apex. If not, we can fall back and use Apex if we can't find somebody locally to teach the class.
Okay. So that is actually listed on page 118 or 122 if you save it to your computer. is where you list the APEX courses, just for your own knowledge. Thanks. And that's all the questions I have.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Next is Caitlin Disler with technology.
Hi, good morning. My name is Caitlin Disler, the Coordinator for Learning Technologies, and I have a few questions this morning related to technology. Technology is peppered throughout the application, so I'll be referencing some page numbers that are throughout the application. The first question that I have is on page 31. I was hoping you could please elaborate about the role of the IT person on your campus and how their role will impact student instruction if they're certified. And that's located within the business technology section.
Currently, the school that I work with in Fort Myers has a full-time technology person on staff. Their main purpose is to make sure that the computers are up and running at all times, because it's an online curriculum, and we're talking about high school kids who have dropped out of school, who have don't have much time. They want to get things done. And when computers go down, they just leave school. I mean, there's nothing for them to do. So it's critical that that IT person makes sure that the systems are running, the Wi-Fi is up and running. We have also used him, because of his degree and experience, to teach some of the curriculum classes, such as PowerPoint and things like that. And so, but the main goal of that IT person is to make sure that all the computers are running, things are working. When it comes time for testing, it's critical that you have that IT person there, because at testing time, if your computer's down, you're in big trouble. So that's their main goal, and that's their main role at the school.
And just a quick follow-up to that, if they were teaching a course and then computers were going down on the other side of campus, how would they prioritize that work? Would they still be doing instruction with the students, or would they be doing that repair that's necessary on the computers?
Well, because we'll have extra people and the principal will be available to cover that class, well, the main thing is to keep the computers running. So if he's teaching a class or she's teaching a class and the computer's down the other side, priority one is based on the principal's decision. They're going to decide, I imagine, to fix those computers. And so they're going to say, okay, I got to cover this class while he goes and fixes the computers. So it's just, it's on-site management that the principal will be determining where people go and what they do. But to me, I would have that class covered while he goes and fixes the computers.
Okay, thank you. Also on page 31, there's reference to a technology plan. I was hoping you could share a little bit of information about that technology plan. It mentions that it'll help teachers improve their lesson plans and delivery methods.
The technology plan has not been approved by this board. They haven't seen it yet. It's the one that I use at the other school in Fort Myers. But it's a plan to help teachers, those that are not computer literate or have issues with how do you do an Excel spreadsheet, or how do I get online in Apex to record my scores and things like that. So the plan is set up so that there's an avenue for the teachers to be trained, if necessary, in the areas where they need help.
Thank you. My next question is between pages. It's referencing page 31 and then also page 526 related to the budget. There's an allocation currently for $58,000 for technology purchases for year one. And I was just hoping you could clarify, does that include staff and student devices and classroom technology? If you can maybe just elaborate on what would be purchased with that $58,000?
What was budget page you referred to?
Page 31 and then also 526 within the budget section.
526. I think we have a separate line item for software and a separate line item for hardware.
Yes, the 58,000 you're referring to would be a makeup of that would be probably starting with your server and any installation costs, which a 10% refresh after the third year for some reason, technology is constantly updating, as everyone here knows. So that's the 58,000, and then the going forward years, starting in the third year, the 13, the 20, and the 21, would be the refresh cost for the main core server. And then we actually cover software by itself and its other line, and then furniture and equipment, make sure I'm looking at my right line here, guys. Then referring back to our furniture and equipment line, is we also have a line up there for any non-secured items that need to fall outside of the server and the core base there. Again, let me mention again, the server is listed, the software is listed separately, and then of course under technology and related is where we actually have the IT, the payroll person for the position you were talking about.
Okay.
So yes, it is in 3 or 4 different places if the way you look at it that way.
So the line for computers then would be staff and student devices?
That is correct, yes.
And do you have a preferred ratio on how much access those students would have? Would it be a 1-to-1 devices?
Mr. Renna can probably reinforce this. They're expecting only 2/3 of the students there at any one time, 67%. Okay. So it would be a 1-to-1 ratio. And I believe you have an overlapping schedule where 67% is there initially, and then on the second phase would be the 1/3 of the students. But the intent is a 1-to-1 ratio for students on site.
Right.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Perfect. Okay. Yes.
Thank you. On page 32, again, I apologize, this is what's in the application and then also the budget section. So page 32 and 526, there's mention, again, as you just said, for the allocation for software. And within the section on page 32, it mentions 29,000 is allocated for Apex licensing. And I know in the actual budget section it says 25,000, and I wasn't sure if it would be the 29,000 or the 25,000, or if there was discrepancy in those numbers.
The actual cost for Apex is about $20,000. In the budget, I believe it says software $25,000. Okay. So the 29,000 on page 32 should probably say 25,000 to align with what the budget says, but we have $5,000 more than we need to pay for Apex to use other software in case we decide to do Read 180, as if someone mentioned earlier, would have some funding in the budget for other software besides Apex.
Thank you. And I know, as you mentioned in that same part, it mentions that if there were remaining funds, it could be used for Apex certified teachers.
Yeah.
And I was just curious, do you know what the rate would be for that? Do they get paid hourly, or how that would use that extra funds?
It's per class, and off the top of my head, I don't remember their rate for that, but it's, like I said earlier, it's something that we use as a fallback because we know that they are certified and they're able to teach those classes. But the kind of kids that we have, they need somebody there with them, working with them, hands-on, eyeball to eyeball. And so using Apex certified teachers is something we could do and is available to us. The cost is more than it would cost us to hire a part-time teacher to teach that class, and that's our preference always, to have that person on staff with those kids. But a lot depends on being able to find that person to do that. And if we can, that's our preference, is to have that person on staff with the kids that's certified. If not, and we really want to offer this class, then we can fall back on the certified Apex teachers.
Thank you. And my last question is in reference to page 451. It mentions that the proposed principal will provide leadership and effective use of technology in the classroom. And I was hoping you could just share how the principal would stay current on trends in educational technology and how they could provide that training to the staff.
I'm sorry that I'm laughing because the school that I have in Fort Myers, I've got a great principal. He's been there for 6 years now, but he's technologically impaired. And so we struggle all the time, the whole staff, to help him, even to text and things like that. But the principal will be working with the IT person because that's the person who really knows technology. We're hoping that the principal knows how to text and knows how to, one of the things that is really important is that we have this classroom walkthrough ability. And it's a little iPad that they carry around. They walk into a classroom and press some buttons and reports are generated and everything is done automatically. Well, that's something that would be critical for the principal to be able to do something like that. And the company that sells that product has training for that principal. And that principal will be trained if they don't know how to read the outline and do it themselves. Someone can actually train them either online or come to the school and train them. So any of the issues with technology dealing with the principal's inability or lack of knowledge thereof, we will be addressing at the board level and getting the training needed for that principal to do what's needed to be done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Holland will be coming up.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Eric Holland, Assistant Director for Digital Learning and Assessment. On page 34 of the PDF, can you just explain a little bit your goal of a 50% annual increase in the percentage of students meeting or exceeding proficient level on state assessment or an equivalent level on the alt assessment?
One of the biggest problems, and I can only go back to the school that I'm working with in Fort Myers, is goals and setting academic and achievement goals for students, graduation goals. The school that we work at, that I work at in Fort Myers, we usually have about 100 to 125 kids in enrollment. We'll graduate anywhere from, I think our smallest class was 8 up to 25 kids. So it's a very small percentage of the enrollment that it's graduating. And so we set these goals high in a hope that we can strive to reach those goals. So 50%, increasing scores for the kids is a high goal for some of these kids because they barely get through school. They've dropped out of school, many of them. They're dropped out, and this is their second chance to get a high school degree. So we set these goals high so that the teachers know that we want to keep pushing these kids as much as we can to get them to achieve what they need to do and do what they need to do to get a high school degree. And so the reality is these goals are high, more than we probably will achieve, but we feel raising the bar and keeping the bar high is really important for our students.
I was curious if you intentionally used the word proficient level, because that is a level 4 on the state assessment versus a level 3, which would be required for graduation.
Yeah, well, level 3 is, we'd be happy to get to level 3. Okay.
Because used the terminology proficient level throughout, and then you also say meeting grade level expectations, which are different than level 3 and level 4. So I was just curious about that.
We want them to meet the requirements to graduate from high school. Okay. And if they go beyond that, we're happy.
On page 35 on the PDF, you had mentioned students are expected to show a minimum of 1 year's growth for each year of attendance. Then it is expected that at least 50% of the students will show greater than 1 year's growth for each year in attendance. Mm-hmm. And then you include this year a little chart as a sample of what that may look like for increasing from 1 year to the next. Mm-hmm. I still had some questions about that. How are you measuring students who are not taking the FSA? So for instance, your 11th graders or 12th graders who have already met the requirement. So how are you measuring 1 year's worth of growth for those students?
As it relates to measuring growth, FAIR, using the FAIR assessments, their AP1 data versus their AP3 data, and being able to compare their growth when they're coming into that grade level, and being able to use their progress monitoring data from year to year. As you mentioned, once they pass the FSA, they're no longer going to receive those assessment data, but FAIR is a more accurate depiction of their progress because it's measured throughout the 3 different assessment periods from their baseline to mid-year to their end of the year. And then that, Volusia also uses FAIR. So if our kids are transitioning in and out, we'll also have data to be able to track those students from year to year to see their growth and to measure 1 year's academic growth.
And then follow up on that, it is expected at least 50% of the students will show greater than 1 year's worth of growth. So how are you going to show greater than 50, more than 1 year's worth of growth?
How are we going to measure more than 1 year's?
Yeah.
Well, based on FAIR and the assessment, there is typical growth as to what 1 year would look like. So that's anyone achieving more than that rate of growth.
And then I think Millie had already talked about on page 40, you mentioned Algebra 2 EOC counting as 30%. Do you have an Algebra 2 EOC that you'll be using that will count for 30%?
Algebra 2 would need to be removed because Algebra 2 is no longer a requirement by the state for students to take that EOC and count towards their total grade.
Thank you.
Thank you. The name of the lady that we met with was Ms. Pfeiffer. Are you familiar with her or not?
No, I'm not.
Jean Pfeiffer. What's the organization she's working on it? Okay. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Hello. My name is Kim Gilland, and I'm the Director of ESE and Student Services with the school district. I have a couple of questions, and they go between Section 4 and Section 6, which is specific to students with disabilities. The first question is on page 24 of Section 4 of the application. It references RTI and MTSS. Within this context, what will be the plan for students who are not successful within the tiers of intervention?
Okay, so the goal, hopefully, is that they are, right? So we start with Tier 1, which is our universal curriculum, and hopefully our kids are responding to that. If not, then we're moving into Tier 1, which is more intensive, small group. That's mentioned in there as far as direct instruction, small group instruction, so it's more tailored to those students' needs based on student data and tracking their data to see if they're performing along with their peers and the benchmarks that are established. Hopefully they're responding. We can stop right there. If we can't, then we move on to Tier 3, which is the most intensive of the tiers, and that is either more specific to that student where it's one-on-one, or it's more intensified as far as with duration and time, so more frequency of those interventions. So they might have been working, but the student just needed more time with those interventions. So based on the team, we'll determine what the needs are for that student, put those interventions in place and monitor them and track the data. If by the time we get to the end of Tier 3, if the student still is not responding to the interventions, then the team would put the package together and refer that student for psychological testing to see if there's any learning disabilities or any other needs that child might be having that's prohibiting them from meeting their academic goals or growth.
Excellent, thank you. The next question is on page 29 of Section 4. The application states that customized computer games can provide a means of meeting students' needs with moderate to intensive disabilities. Similarly, on page 47 of the application, there's a reference to providing related services. In addition to these games and related services, what specially designed instruction will be provided to students with disabilities?
Okay. That depends on their IEP. So we're meeting those students exactly where they are, using their IEP goals to determine exactly what academic interventions we need to put in place. So based on their reading goals, if it's a phonics goal or vocabulary or comprehension, it's using intervention programs to where we're targeting that child's specific goals in that's itemized in the IEP to determine what resources are put in place.
Thank you. On page 46, with regard to enrollment projection, the application cites that VCS has 17% of enrollment identified as students with disabilities. The application indicates that you would serve 9% students with...
At that time, when we determine what our real and actual numbers are and the level of services needed for our ESE students, a budget will be revised based on those actual numbers so that we are in compliance with what we need for those students financially and academically.
Okay, thank you. My final question is within section 6 on page 50. It states that if a student has an IEP that is not available, has a service listed in the IEP that's not available at the school, they will meet with the district and the parent and decide what's best for the child. Can you please give us examples of ESE services that may not be available at the school?
Well, first, the biggest thing is FAPE, right? Making sure we're providing the most appropriate placement for these students, and so that we're meeting their needs. Typically, at the high school level, a lot of the students that with our population may serve are services that we can provide. There are consultation services, there are pull-out services, there are push-in services, things that are within that the school can easily facilitate. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking maybe if it's a student that is a student with autism that might require to be in an autism cluster, and that's listed on their IEP as the most appropriate setting. Based on the school that we are looking to open, we may not have an autism cluster, and that may not be the best placement for that child. So we would definitely want to work with the district and the parent and ensure we're placing that child where they would get the best educational opportunity to meet their needs. And while that parent might want them in a school that offers this program, that might not meet that child's overall best needs, and therefore we'll work with the district and the parent to make sure the parent understands that and that child gets exactly what they need to be successful.
Excellent. I'm sorry, I did say that was my last question, but you mentioned something, and now I have one more follow-up.
Okay.
So I didn't see a staffing summary per se for with teachers with disabilities, but I did see that it referenced one ESE teacher. And so if you're talking about providing consultation, push-in, and pull-out services, how did you come up with the staffing of one ESE teacher for 4 grades?
I have to look at that section.
Let me see here. I'll see if I can help.
And I think that was also based on the percentage.
Yeah, I'm trying to do the math right now.
That you put in place, which is a little fluid based on the population that we actually receive. So this is all, best in this case, in 9%, then we would need this amount of staff. Yeah. But of course, if we receive students who have more of a pull-out, IEP that calls for more pull-out, then obviously in more time outside of the classroom, it will facilitate having possibly more than one ESE person. So that would possibly fluctuate based on the actual student's needs that are indicated on that IEP. If it sticks to 9% with more of a consultation, then it may fit right in that realm of that one person. But we're very aware that it's our primary focus to ensure that those students are receiving the services that are indicated on their IEP with fidelity, and making sure we have appropriate staff in place to provide those services.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For section 7, English language learners, we have no questions from the district. And up next is section 8, school climate and discipline.
Oh, no one from ESOL?
No.
Oh, that's my favorite area. I'm sorry.
So I'm Cindy Fisher, and I'm with Educational Enhancements, which includes a number of different areas, but most particularly for this section, student discipline. I want to follow up a little bit on some staffing questions, but before I do that, I do want to say that throughout your application, it's very obvious that what you're attempting to do is create a very positive and encouraging atmosphere and that's emphasized a good deal through your application. It's commendable. I hope that's what we're doing in all our schools. But on page 59, you address how critical staff selections are as they relate to individual belief systems and ideologies, and stress the importance, in particular in this area, you were talking about the importance of the principal as an individual in creating that positive ethos at the school. Do you have a principal selected yet, or
Not at this time. We have not. We have people in the area that we are talking to and thinking about, and who are familiar with the area. One of the things that I like to do is find out who's retiring in your system and might be interested in staying busy. They know everybody to call, and they know how to do it, and so that's always a possibility. But it's important to this board and to me as a consultant to advise them to look for local people who are local, who know the community and know what they're doing. And so that's important. So we don't have anybody at this time, but we'll be actively seeking and asking for your advice in the future.
Well, and this you may answer this the same way because in addition to the principal, obviously you're going to have to employ a number of teachers. I mean, we're all working within a teacher shortage right now,
right.
And we're looking, based on what you're saying, for some very specific personalities and some very specific skill sets. So, do you have a plan for recruiting those teachers?
We do. It will be local. We'll contact the newspapers, put ads in the paper, and we'll contact teacher. But when I ran a high school in Fort Lauderdale, and I interviewed teachers, I had a bunch of questions. They're all standard questions that we all ask, but there was only one question that really mattered to me, and that was, tell me something you've done in education that you're proud of. And the person would talk about, oh, I developed this test, and I was in charge of the band. And then the teacher would say, I'm really proud of this one student who was falling through the cracks and no one thought they'd make it, and I reached out and helped them, and that's what I'm most proud of. And that's the teacher I want. I want that teacher who looks for the good in every student, whether they're a certified teacher, have temporary certification, I've been teaching for 20 or 30 years, or brand new. I want that person who looks for the good in every kid and wants to help them. And that's something that I hope the principal will do when they're interviewing for the teachers for this job, for this school.
Well, and I know this isn't about discipline, but while we're talking about recruiting, the question's come up a couple of times this morning already, but can you elaborate a little bit more on how specifically you're planning to, I hesitate to use the term recruit, but find the students that you're looking for? We're looking at kids that have already dropped out, or students that you feel like are about to drop out. I mean, do you have an action plan for that?
Well, I don't know how available it is with this district, but in the other school, we get a list of students who have actually dropped out of school, their addresses, and we contact them directly. We also have open houses and things like that, but we will do specific mailings to people who have already dropped out of school. The second area that we will focus on is the high school guidance counselors, and make very close connections with these people. And unfortunately, what happens in the school in Fort Myers is that when it's time for testing, the high schools get rid of the kids that they know are going to hurt them on testing. We get an incredible increase in enrollment at that time. Recently, we just got 30 extra kids that we weren't anticipating because the high schools get rid of them so it doesn't hurt them for testing. We take them. We take all kids. And so we make connections with the guidance counselors at the high schools. One of the things that we did in Fort Myers is we'd go to court. We'd make connections with the judge, the juvenile judge. And I remember one time we'd sit out in the lobby, in the waiting room, and a kid would come in, going to see the judge in an hour, 20 minutes, we'd give him our brochure. And one kid went in to see the judge, and he had our brochure in his hand, and the judge said, "Are you thinking about going to that school?" And the kid said, "Oh, I'm thinking about it." And the judge says, "If you go to that school, all your charges are dropped." Okay? And so making connections with the court system so that they can help direct kids out of the prison system, out of their system, into an educational system is very important for us also.
Okay, on page 59, you were listing some specific discipline or behavior management programs, and I understand those were just suggestions, but I was looking at some of these, we're familiar with a couple of them. Positive Learning Collaboration, I understand, is a program out of New York with along with AFT.
Yeah.
PATHS, the Promoting Alternative Thinking Strategies, I believe, is an elementary program, and we've got a 9-12 school here. The Promise program, were you referring to Brevard, Sandy Hook? Which Promise program is that?
I just did some searching on the internet to find what type of programs were out there. I didn't delve into the areas, what they do, or the grade levels that they serve. So I just wanted to let you know that we're aware that there are programs out there, and at the time when it's appropriate, the board and the principal will decide which ones they want to focus on totally.
Okay. And then finally, on page 35 in section 5, your behavioral goal addresses a decline in suspensions and states that students attending will have at least 70% fewer suspensions than other high schools in the area. That's certainly commendable. Can you share your specific strategies as well as the possible alternatives to suspension that would allow you to obtain these reductions?
Well, one of the things that I did in the school that I ran in Fort Lauderdale is I told the kids there'll be no fights at my school. And they laughed. They said, "There's fights every day at the public schools, and there's 2 or 3 every day." And I just said, there will be no fights here, and if there are, that person will be arrested. And I had 1 fight in the 2 years that I ran that school, because that girl who started that fight got arrested, and the message was clear. We're not going to stand for that. And so it's all a matter of the ethos that we talked about, setting up an atmosphere of what's right and good for your kids, and how to avoid the discipline issues. The most important thing is that we develop a rapport with all of our students. Every teacher, our principal, anybody who's working at the school gets a rapport with these kids so they feel comfortable and safe to come and talk to somebody about an issue or problem. I'm going to get into a fight, I'm losing my temper, and there's a chance to diffuse the situation before it escalates. And that's the key, is working with these kids, getting to know them, letting them know that you care and you trust is developed between you and them, so that we can avoid so many of the problems that happen in our schools ahead of time. And that's key for us, is the more discipline issues you can avoid, the more education that takes place. And that's what we're looking for.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Dyer's shop, I believe, is up next. Oh.
Good morning. My name is Caitlin Disler, Coordinator of Learning Technologies, and I will be filling in for Dr. Katie Dyer. She is unable to be here this morning. So I will be asking questions related to supplemental programming and also professional development. We'll begin with supplemental programming, section 9. And I'm hoping you could please clarify information that's located on page 61. There are 2 contradictory statements, and we're just hoping for you to clarify, please, the intent. In the first paragraph on page 61, it states that there is no room in our program for extra or co-curricular activities, such as clubs or sports. And then later within that section, it states we will also welcome any other type of extra and co-curricular activities that the students are interested in. We know that these supplemental programs are often motivation for students, and we are hoping you could please share your intent and how you'll keep students connected.
Again, back to my experience, when class is over, these kids want to leave. Many of them have jobs in the afternoon, so in the morning session, many of these kids leave. They don't want to stick around and don't care to. They have jobs to go to and things that are happening. So, and then when the afternoon group comes in, by the time school's over, it's the end of the day. It's late, and so we don't really feel that there is going to be a need for these kind of programs. However, we do not want to close the door and say that this can't happen. We realize that maybe there's a group of students, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, that might be interested in doing something along these lines. And so we've opened up the possibility to have that happen. And we're not against it happening at all. And if there's an interest and we can find a supervisor and the budget allows for it, we'll do it. So that's why there's contradictory statements there, because we just don't see it happening, but we don't want to say that it can and won't happen. We want to be able to do it if it happens.
Okay, thank you. There's mention of a student council, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that. If you know how many students you would hope to be involved. I know this kind of mirrors the statement that you just mentioned. Yeah. And if you think there would be funding that would be required for student council.
Again, I can only refer back to the school that I work at right now. We do have a student council. We have a president, a vice president, secretary, and treasurer, four members of student council. They meet maybe once a month with the principal to discuss issues, do fundraising, wear a crazy hat to school day or different socks or whatever the items are to do fundraising. I don't see, we haven't used any funds at all from our budget to support that group, although they do have a snack account, and they've used some funds from the snack account to do certain things with them. But as far as using the actual funds that is generated for the school, we don't have anything in our budget allocated for student council. But that's how it would look. The problem that we have at this school is that if we have a morning session and an afternoon session, do we need 2 student councils? Because the students that go to the afternoon session really don't represent the students in the morning session and vice versa. So that's something that the principal will talk about and consider. We might have to have 2, one that represents the group in the morning and the group in the afternoon. There are going to be 2 different types of students. The ones in the morning, we know for sure the majority of them are going to want to leave right away and go to work. And the ones in the afternoon are more laid back in the morning, like to sleep in, and will get their work done in the afternoon. So we may need 2 student councils.
Thank you. I'm going to move to section 13 for professional development, just to ease with transitions. On page 74 and 75, there's not mention of paraprofessionals, but on page 88, there mentions providing in-service education for paraprofessionals if there's money in the budget to hire them. And we're hoping you can just clarify what your hope or intent would be with paraprofessionals, if it would just be pending budget or if they would be included within your staffing allocation.
The ideal thing is to have as many adults in the room with the kids as possible. And paraprofessionals is something that we would love to have. And again, it all depends on the budget, and if we can generate enough funds to do so, we will hire them. And the intent then would be for the teacher to work directly with the paraprofessional and say, Johnny is having some problems with this this section of Algebra 2, and could you sit down and help him while he's going over the apex? Just sit next to him and help him with the problems. Again, it all comes back to budget. Budget generates what you can do as far as staffing is concerned. And if we have the money, then we will hire people, and they will be working directly in the classroom with the students. Another thing that we've discovered, that if we have a lot of ESE students, we will hire a specialist to work with our ESE students also. So that's something that once we know the number of ESE students and we determine it's a large number, and we have to provide more than just consultative services to them, then we will redo our budget and hire somebody if we need to help those kids.
Thank you for clarifying that. Also related to professional development, I was hoping that maybe you could share a little bit about what the induction program would look like for new teachers. So new teachers coming on board, what their professional learning would look like.
What page is that on?
Should be around the pages of 87, is in reference to professional development, but if you had a plan for new teachers.
I think on page 87 it talks about a dedicated intensive 2 weeks, which provides an intensive 2 weeks for staff development prior to the start of each school year to ensure that the teachers that are on staff are properly trained in the curriculum and know how to implement APEX and any other curriculum. Specialize in those programs, also training new teachers in our behavior plan, behavior management, all the things that encompasses the school, right? Because it's more than just showing up. It's more than just knowing the content. You can be an amazing teacher, but if we can't manage the classroom, we can't create that positive learning environment, then some of that learning will go to waste. So within those 2 weeks, it's academic training, it's school climate training, behavior management, technical management, grade management pieces, right? How do you manage your time? How do you get it all done? You really don't get it all done, but how do they manage it all? And so that all of those pieces are in place so we can have a conducive working environment. And in addition to those intensive 2 weeks of training that the teachers would receive prior to the school year, it will be the school's goal to also keep refresher courses going in throughout the year. As a former teacher, current principal, the first 2 weeks prior to school, everyone's excited, we're trained, we're ready to go, our hair looks nice, and then 3-4 months into the school year, we're all like frazzled, and things start to kind of show their little wares around the edges. So making sure you were building in professional development throughout the year to just refresh on best practices, share best practices as teachers are doing things, any issues that come up, working with administration to ensure that we're addressing those before they escalate, and making sure our teachers are staying abreast of anything that might be changing. We're in Florida. It changes all the time. So ensuring our teachers have the updated training on curriculum, rules, laws, ethics, professionalism, things of that nature.
And a lot of the professional development of a teacher depends on the principal being on top of what's happening in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And if that principal determines that this teacher is weak in a certain area, hopefully they can find somebody who's strong in that area and pair them up and help them work together. Or they can direct them to some research to help them with whatever it is that they're having trouble with. So it all goes back to the leadership and the control of the school in the hands of the principal, doing what's right to help teachers so that they can do a better job in the classroom.
Thank you for elaborating on that plan. I just have 2 more questions. On page 87, it describes team meetings, that they would occur once every 2 to 4 weeks with all teachers. I was hoping you could share the logistics with how that meeting might happen, since there are 2 shifts of teachers. When would this occur during the school schedule? I know that it mentions that you'll work it out before the school starts, but I was hoping you can maybe just share a little bit on the intended plan.
Well, right now it's obvious that all teachers will not be able to meet if they're teaching from the 7:30 to the 12:30 hour. So they would meet after school is done for them. They'd meet like it from 12:30 to 1:30 an hour once a month. And the teachers that are teaching in the afternoon session could meet in the morning session. Sometimes there might be an overlap, and we'd have to work that out. But if it didn't work out, then they'd meet after school is finished. So the two groups of teachers cannot possibly take off and meet during the day, so it would have to be after their session is over.
Thank you. And my last question within professional development is actually related to a budget item for professional development. On page 542, there are $500 that are allocated for professional development, and it references earlier in page 88 that all administrators and teacher facilitators will receive in-service training by consultants. And we were hoping we could just clarify, do you have an estimated cost for a consultant if they would be able to do all of the training with that $500, if you believe that would be possible? Apex provides, as part of their fee for their program, they provide 3 to 5 days of Apex training for our teachers before school opens. So that's where they'd get most of their training, because that's what they're going to be using is the Apex program to put their grades in and to see how kids are doing. So that's critical they get that training, and like I said, it's included in their fees. We hope to be able to send our teachers to district training that should be for free. And so that won't cost anything. The $500 is a small amount of money.
Just a token, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, the intent of the $500 just to cover some papers and stuff like that. Not intended to, as Ron said, not intended to in any way look like it's paying for a contractor, right?
Thank you very much for clarifying that. We'll be moving back to section 10. I apologize, we jumped around a little bit just for ease of transition. So section 10 for governance.
And Nathan Pollock, legal counsel for the district. First question on SunBiz, and also it looks like on page 370 of the application, and it's talking about the corporation. It says the last event was a reinstatement on January 10th, 2019. Why was the corporation reinstated at that time, or what caused the reinstatement?
Well, the attorney that did this for us originally just dropped the ball, and we did not realize that he had not renewed when it was due, and so when we realized that, we reinstated it.
Okay. Are you still using the services of that attorney, or are you guys?
He was volunteering, so he's got the best price that we can afford, and
I understand.
And right now he's in Europe somewhere traveling, and so he's a really great guy, and he's really interested in this school, so that's what happened.
Okay. How long of a period of time was the corporation not in effect, I guess?
You know,
a month or so.
Yeah.
Okay. In section 10, and it's kind of on a few different pages, 62, 63, and 64, it kind of jumps back and forth between board of directors, governing board, and board. Is that all referring to the same board?
Yes.
Okay. And then there's a reference to a chairperson or chairman. Is that reference to the president?
Yeah, well, yes, okay. Yes.
On page 63 of that section, it talks about the board will follow Robert's Rules of Order. And why was that selected?
Just because it seems that if a board is having issues functioning, that's always the best fallback that exists in life, that we all know what Robert's Rules of Order and how that works. And so it's there in case there's an issue and they're having trouble functioning, that we can say, well, you need to have the second here. We can't, that's not going to happen until if that's needed, then we put that in an application for that reason.
Okay. Are the board members receiving copies of it? Is that something that's required reading of them, or something available?
Only that they'll be trained, under the requirements of Florida state law as how to run and operate a board for a charter school. That's the only training they'll get.
Okay. On page 66, looks like in section G, it talks about some of the founding board members will transition to the governing board. What is that reference to?
That reference to the fact that originally we had I think an 8-member board last year when we submitted this application, and they were active, and then recently we've cleaned up the board and people have dropped off because of different reasons, and responsibilities, and others have been added to the board who are local and know the community better. And so the board has been transitioning from last year when we first started this application to the actual governing board that exists today.
Okay, and are the founding board members transitioning there, or is
Some of them, yes.
Is that a reference to the 4 that are on the board now?
Yeah, 2 of them were on the board last year. The board president, Mr. Norris, who works at the university here, and Pam? No, and LaToya. She was on the board last year also.
Okay. How about the people who dropped off? Are they still involved in the charter?
They are in the sense that they are committed. They love and like what we want to do. They know that we're here to help kids, and that's important to them. And we know that we can count on them if we have an issue or question or a problem, that they may be having some expertise in that area, that we can call on them and get free advice and help from them. Okay. And so that's really important, is that even though they're no longer on the board, they still feel connected to what we're doing.
Okay. And I believe you referenced you're a consultant. Are they going to be consultants for the board, essentially, or free advice?
Free advice, yeah. Free advice.
Free advice. And
that's
no
all.
All right.
Unless we come up with somebody who wants to give us some money and we can pay us. But, you know, a lot of what this school is about, and what it really is about, is helping kids that have fallen through the cracks, kids who are not making it out there, kids who and I'm not saying anything bad about the Volusia School Board, because this happens in every school district in the United States. There are kids that just fall through the cracks and don't make it. And that's who we are. We want to bring them back. That's what we're all about. And so when you're touching our heartstrings about helping kids, and maybe they'll graduate from high school instead of going to jail, then we all want to be here to help the school. And we want to help those kids that have left your school system, who are out there trying to figure out what to do, and say, give it another chance. We can help you. And so the board members that are no longer on the board still have that commitment in their hearts to help this school and do what's best for these kids.
On page 66 for financial, has a statement, we are currently looking for someone to help us with this. What steps are being implemented, and what help would be found?
Well, that is School Financial Services. School Financial Services is, once again, doing this for free. They've prepared the budget 2 years in a row. Keith is here helping us present the application today. They're not charging the board anything for any of this. However, there is no commitment that this board will hire their company as the financial accounting firm to do our accounts receivable and accounts payable. Their company will be part of a bidding process that will be looked at, and let's be realistic, they're doing all this for free. Unless somebody else is going to come in and do the job for free, which is not going to happen, we're probably going to hire them as the company to do our bookkeeping for us for the first year, if not longer. And so it needs to be stated that they do not have a permanent position with us until school is approved, the board puts out a bid for accounting services, and their bid is reviewed just like everybody else's and voted on by the board. I think that's why that's in there.
And it looks like I think it's the bylaws on page 394. Mm-hmm. In section 4.17, talks about arbitration of deadlocks within the board of directors.
There we go. Yeah. Okay. My recommendation to all the 30 plus charter schools that I've ever opened and worked with is that you try to have an odd number of board members so you don't have a tie. Because when you have a tie, then you just go round and round sometimes forever. And even though you have an odd number of board members, somebody may not show up, and you have an even number voting that night. Okay? And so this is in there in case that happens and the board gets deadlocked, that we can figure out a way to break that deadlock, and that's what that's for.
So you would submit it to a neutral arbitrator to
That's
decide?
basically what it says here, yes, and someone who's disinterested, qualified, et cetera, et cetera. How we find that person, I don't know at this time. You know, my experience of working with charter schools for almost 20 years now is that this has never happened. And the attorney who wrote our bylaws for us put that in there. So I guess he figures that might happen someday. I don't know. But it's never happened in all the years that I've been working with charter schools.
Okay. Do any of your other charter schools that you work with have an arbitration clause for deadlocks at the board of directors? Or
not that I know of, no.
Okay. On page 416, at the last paragraph identifies you as the board vice president. Is that just a typo?
Oh, no, that's not there. That is. I'm a board consultant.
Okay. Do you have any role with the board itself?
No, not at this time.
And then on page
Wow, thank you.
413.
413. Yeah.
And I believe this is a board, kind of reading, I think it's a board member annual disclosure statement.
Yes, it is.
The board liability questionnaire talks about, ask yourself these questions to help you decide if a decision your board makes could create potential liability for the charter school. If in doubt, talk to the board chair. How would you talk to the board chair if there's a...
It'd have to be through the attorney, because an individual cannot talk to the board chair directly about any concerns unless you did it publicly at the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, it would not be something separately done.
And above that, kind of that first full paragraph after board confidentiality policy, what type of information do you believe the board's going to gain that's confidential at board meetings that would be subject to confidentiality?
Maybe information about a student that they may have. Include details about, if there's any conflict of interest with property that's owned. The board member may know somebody that owns a property that we're going to rent or something like that. Maybe, I don't.
That they're disclosing at the meeting?
Yeah, yeah, they have to disclose all that kind of stuff right up front before any votes and discussion takes place. That's about all I can think of. The property is probably the biggest one.
Okay, and if it's discussed at that board meeting, then it would be subject to this confidentiality?
Yes, I would think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are the questions I have for Section 10. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sections 11 and 12, management, staffing, HR, and employment, have no questions at this time. Section 14 will be next, student recruitment and enrollment, and they have no questions either at this time. So we will move on to Section 15, parent community information.
Hello, I'm Kelly Schultz. I'm the Director of Community Information. I just have one question. What types of parental involvement activities are you planning to implement?
Wow. I've been working with the school, as I keep referring to, in Fort Myers, and the most difficult thing is to get parents involved in school, especially when you're talking about high school kids that have reached the age of what we call maturity, and the parents will call them and say, hey, he's 18, it's his problem, you deal with it. And so it's been the biggest issue for us. We always have been able to find at least one parent to serve on as a representative to the parent body on our school board, and they come to every meeting, and we don't have to, but we always try to find someone who in that position whose student or child is in the school. even though it's not really required. That's something we think it's really important. And so the parent involvement basically will get down to that one parent that you hopefully can find. And if you can find more, great. You know, if you find somebody to do your PTA and come in, you know, once a week and do something special with the kids or for the kids. But the reality is at this age level of student and these parents that we're dealing with, there's just very, very little interest. And so we try to, we do the call system where we call everybody on the phone automatically for whatever issue is coming up, hurricanes or whatever's going on. We have parent nights where we ask parents to come in and go over the report cards with kids. We have individual conference with parents when there's issues. So we do all those things, but to get an active PTA or organization to help with the school has been very, very difficult. We will do at this school everything possible to try and get that organization running and going, but you know, experience shows that it's very difficult.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is section 16, facilities.
Hi, Eric Kozelski again, facilities planning. I have a few notes here that I want to put into like one question. So okay. Page 97 through 99 really goes over your facilities. Mm-hmm. It says you've identified several possible locations, one being a vocational school, others being more office type space. Mm-hmm. Given your statement that you want to do hands-on, pardon me, and I know you touched on this earlier, so given your statement that you wanted to do more hands-on learning and more trade-oriented training, are you looking to have your business partners provide spaces for that? Because I don't see any specialized space in that. And if you are not, you don't have a renovation budget for any of these.
Yeah, logistically, it's very difficult. We tried once to do automotive at the other school, where kids had their own cars, and they would go to this shop, and we tried it for a month, and we were concerned, extremely concerned about the legality of kids going off campus, going to another site and being trained. And it just, our attorney at that school recommended that it was a big liability that we should avoid. So to answer your question about working with business partners and sending kids to be trained at different locations, that's something that I don't think we will do. Again, it will come down to the attorneys making sure that that's safe and we're avoiding any liabilities. We do an electrical program at this school, and we have a small room. It actually was a two-car garage that we converted into an electric shop. And the kids learn how to bend metal pipes, and they learn the different gauges of wiring. And it's a very, very simple. I think the whole thing cost us like $1,500 to outfit the room so that the kids can come in there and be trained in the basic OSHA requirements before they can take the core classes that are required to be an electrician. And so, you know, we're going to look for two things. The space will dictate what we can do, and the cost will dictate, you know, so if we have room in a building that has room to house a room for electrical training, we will do that, and we'll find the money to pay for the initial cost of setting that up and try to find a teacher that's certified that can teach that class. But to answer your question about sending kids off campus to be trained with our business partners, at this time, I personally don't see that as something that we're going to be doing unless, you know, we're sure that it's safe and there's no legal ramifications of doing that.
I guess a follow-up would be, are you going to be able, okay, you're talking about electrical and you've talked about hospitality.
Yes, yeah.
Are there any other low-cost options that you are looking at? Or, I mean, this seems like you're looking for more of a turnkey facility. You want to be able to go in there, put as little money into renovation as possible and
Yes.
get things started.
Exactly right. And I've opened up like probably 20 schools in the state of Florida, and I'd usually try to find a church to go into, because the church has classroom facilities. There's not just one big open room sometimes, and the rooms are sitting empty. They're already zoned. They already meet standards that would be adequate for a charter school, and they're not getting any income in, so we can pay them rent, so it's a win-win for everybody. And so I will be focusing on looking at churches in the area for exactly that, because financially it's the best thing for our budget. You know, for churches, I can get $50,000 for a church, where I can pay rent for these guys, it'll cost me $100,000. So the exact site has not been determined. I will be doing a lot of research and driving around and phone calls for churches to see if anybody has a facility that might work. And when that happens, sometimes they have extra rooms that you can use for certain things. But the basic trades will be things that we can do easily on computers. You know, right now I can turn all the lights on in my house and put all the music on in my house, and I drive my wife crazy sometimes when I'm out and all of a sudden the lights go on and off and the music starts playing. We want these kids to be able to, if they're learning a trade, know how to do the technology that's involved with these kind of things. And so the trades that we're looking for are those that can be done easily in the classroom without much cost involved.
Thank you. Oh, I guess next is section 17. Transportation, sorry.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Assistant Director Davis from Student Transportation, and we just had a couple of questions. In your application, you stated 43% of the students are factored for transportation. Is that Voltron, or do you have a contingency plan outside of that?
We're participating 43% or will need public transportation. That's Voltron, yes.
So you're going to use the Voltron passes, but
Yes.
have you marketed or targeted any other area outside of Voltron, mainly because of the IEPs that may need attendance for those students, and Voltron doesn't provide that service?
Well, first of all, the two of the sites that we're really focusing on both have Voltron bus stops right in front of them. So that's really, really important for us. It was my understanding that Voltron does have handicap buses where, let me see here.
They do, but some of the ESE and IEPs require individual attention for those children, and they do not provide that service.
If we are required to provide a transportation service for any ESE student, we'll definitely find out a way to get that done, whether it's a private vendor. That's probably the best and only way that I can think of right now. But that is something that we will never, ever hinder a special education student from attending our school for any reason. You know, dealing with transportation for sure.
Okay. And I think he answered the other two questions in his previous section, so we're good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're up to section 18, food service.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Robinson Prime. I'm the coordinator for training and marketing with Skoye Cafe. Just a few questions here. On paragraph 2, under food service section, you stated that you have researched the 2017 Florida statutes for Chapter 595. Are you aware of the 2018 update? It's page 102.
Well, if there are 2018 updates, the person who's in charge of that is the gentleman behind me. He does food service for numerous charter schools in the state of Florida, and so I'm sure he's aware of what's going on there, because he opens up.
Wasn't aware of the updates of 2018. Was not aware of that.
Okay. Yeah, the information is virtually similar, but I know they just released that update, and I just wanted to make you aware of that.
Okay.
On question number 2, in the budget section, you have the reimbursement rates listed there for free, reduced, and paid, and they're significantly different than what's listed under USDA. Wanted to know how you came up with those rates, or they factored in with a different price?
The rates that we have here, when you are you talking about the reimbursement rate from the state, or what are you talking about?
Sir, could you come up to the podium? We'll have trouble hearing. You can pull up another chair if you'd like. Thank you.
Are we talking about the reimbursement rates from the state?
Yeah. So for lunch, it's a line item price in reimbursable meal. You have $1.66 for free, $1.86 for reduced, and $2.70 for paid. And on the USDA website, it's 39 cents for free, $2.99 for reduced, and $3.39 for paid. So just wanted to know how you got those numbers.
Keith, I believe those numbers were Desiree told me she got those directly from the Volusia County website.
The ones in the budget, you're correct. I agree completely. It's $39, $2.99, $3.39 for the, and we actually budgeted $39, $2.91, $3.31, just a little bit under that. Obviously, there had been some movements from 17, 18 to 18, 19 that we failed to pick up there. So we actually under budgeted just a little bit on revenue, thank goodness. But those were from the NSLP reimbursement chart, correct?
Okay. Page 99 under facilities, you said you will minimally include sufficient space for a lunchroom / student break room. Where do you plan to store the kitchen equipment mentioned on page 103 under food service?
Well, hopefully we can find a facility that has a area that we can store a hot table or warmers. As you know, in our application, we spoke about that we're going to use the National School Lunch Program, and we're going to go out to bid. And most folks that when you go out
implies hot food and reheating, but I didn't see on your list of equipment, I didn't see like an oven or reheating equipment. So do you plan on cooking or reheating?
So our intentions is whatever vendor that we bid, whatever vendor that we decide that we go with, that we decide that we're going to use, that the food will be actually come in hot. So our job, our staff, all they would do is actually put that food in the warmer or on the hot table to keep that food hot for the students.
Gotcha. Do you plan to have any snack or beverage vending machines on campus available to students?
If we do, it'll be nutritional. If we do, but that'll be a board decision. That'll be a decision that the board will have to make.
Okay, and that kind of aligns with the next question. You said there'll be a nutritional. Are you aware of the Smart Snack program? Yes. Okay. Page 103, you had mentioned a food service manager. I looked on your staffing plan on page 530 through 534. I didn't see that listed. Was that listed elsewhere, or how do you plan to?
No, and we'll probably miss that. And as you know, with the food service manager, that can be something that the board can decide that they want to do. Because as you know, as a food service manager, you have to go out to bid. That management company have to bid on it, but that'll be a decision that the board will have to make. I would recommend that they don't have a food service management because the school is so small, the population is so small. So I'll recommend to the board that they would not have that, but that'll be the board decision.
But you would have someone there to serve.
Correct. Yes. Well, the school will hire. The school will probably hire. Well, they'll probably use staff members that would serve the students lunch.
Get some parent volunteers.
Okay, all right. Last question. What do you mean by we have developed a national lunch program application process to select a private provider?
So we'll follow the guidelines and the standards that the National School Lunch Program has. So what we'll do is, as you probably know, that we'll go out to bid, and so we'll align with the same standards that the National School Lunch Program has. So that's what we mean when we're talking about establishing a private. What page was that again? I'm sorry.
Page 103.
103?
I believe, yeah. Yep.
Yes, we'll be in line with the National School Lunch Program.
Okay, thank you. Next section, section 19.
All right, I'm Craig Pender, Coordinator, Emergency Management and School Safety. Looking at the application, I did see you did take the questions that we had last year, and you updated some of the little things, so I only have a few questions for you, just to kind of elaborate a little bit. On page 107, it's the last paragraph, you said that you have funds to hire security staff. You referred to the SRO guardians, then a security agency. In Volusia, we're either using the SROs or the sheriff-approved guardians, because I kind of got a little confused in that part. Which way are you trying to go? Or is...
I'm not sure what the decision of Volusia was, whether you have to use SROs or the other program. If we're allowed to use the Guardian program, that's going to be a lot cheaper than having security officers on campus, and so that's the way we would like to go. People who have been trained by the Sheriff's Department to serve this purpose. If the school board does not come to that agreement and all schools are providing SRO officers, that's the way we'll go. And
all right. Well, are you trying to have extra guards at all?
We would love to, and it all comes down to money again. The school that I have in Fort Myers, we have a full-time SRO officer outside of the campus all day long, and we have hired a private company to have a guard inside the school all day long also. And we've got the funds to do that, and if we come up with the money here, we'll do that same thing.
All right, thank you. Next question. Just how will you set up the school-based threat assessment teams? Because you put in there, well, actually you did, but how will you set them up?
There, as we all know, if you read our section last year, this section last year was a half a page, and now it's 3 pages, and we don't need to discuss why. But there are all sorts of tools and instruments and documents out there now after what happened that tell us exactly what to do and how to do it step by step. Okay? And those are the documents that we'll be using to determine our school assessment team and who's on it and when it's formed and what we share with teachers and what's inside the classroom and the codes and all that kind of stuff. And so you can tell from the way we added to this section that we hold this part of our school as high priority. I mean, and especially dealing with the kind of kids that we're dealing with now and the kids we're looking to deal with. And so we're going to be making sure that as part of those 2 weeks of in-service training at the beginning of the year, we bring as many people in from the Sheriff's Department, from your office, whoever we can to go through training and what to do and drills and all that kind of stuff, because it's critical for us to have a safe school. And so to answer your question, the principal and the team will research all the documents that are out there with the step-by-step procedures of how to do this, that, and that's what we're going to implement. Follow it by the law. So
all right, that works. That kind of leads into 2 of my other questions. It says on page 14, you mentioned screening for testing to be within 45 days of referral, and that the student be provided a referral for resources and or services within 30 days of the testing screening. How are you going to go about identifying a student? What are you going to do? Because you talk about having the time frame to get it done, but how do you initially start it?
Identifying the students who are going to attend the school. Again, in the case of the school in Fort Myers, we contacted the district they sent us a list of every student who has dropped out of their public school.
But no, not that part. I mean, like, if you're identifying a student who has a disability, or how you talk about having 45 days to have the turnaround, how do you identify? I mean, how do you decide that, hey, we need to look at this kid?
Well, I do believe as part of this new program that's being drawn out is a critical part that we sometimes forget about is the mental health department, and that's where we have partnered in our other school with different mental health agencies to come in and work with us and the kids that we are determining may have some issues. You know, a sad story is one of our kids at the school in Fort Myers went home one day and sat in his front yard and took out a rifle and started shooting at the dollar store across the street. We had no clue that this kid was having any kind of issues or anything. We didn't. If we did, we would have done something about it, and we would have gone through a process, you know, with the mental health agencies that are local that we were working with. And so it comes back to what I said earlier about teachers and students, you know, having a good rapport and finding out if a kid is troubled, having some problems, and referring them to the right mental health agencies, counselors, whoever that's out there that can help us.
All right, that kind of leads up to my other question. We kind of combine it. On 104, you also mentioned the youth mental health awareness training, and you list the programs, but I need you to be able to elaborate on more on what you're going to do. I mean, are you going to have somebody on staff that can help with that, help identify? I mean, I know you say you're going to reach out to the outside agencies, but do you have somebody on campus? I mean, you know, you're training a guidance counselor. How the initial step?
At this time, we'll definitely have to take that into consideration. Have somebody between the ESE coordinator, who usually has a good handle on the issues, the emotional issues of students. That person would be somebody ideal to be get some extra training on this. Guidance counselor, that would be a perfect person also. And so, again, it comes down to the budget and trying to find the money and having the people on staff in position to help these kids before things happen is the key. So.
All right, I think I just have one more question. What visitor management system will you use? I didn't see that in there.
Well, I had a lot of problems with one that I tried to use and told that it was what they use and what might be financially something that we can afford. Right now, the vision is that the school is locked. You can't get in, and there'll be a camera, and you'll be buzzed in from the outside. And then when they get in, they'll have to show their ID, and there are systems out there that we have used that allow the secretary to type in or scan actually the driver's license, and it comes back whether there's their criminal record, whether they have any kind of things on their record. So those are the tools that definitely would be putting into place.
Okay. All right, that's it.
The next sections are sections 20 and 21, budget and financial management.
You're up.
Good morning. I'm Deb Muller, the Chief Financial Officer. I just want to talk a little bit about your plans for teacher salaries. On page 109, you state that the average salary is budgeted at $38,000 per year. Our current first-year salary is $39,142, with the anticipation that by 2021 it'll increase another 2 to 2.5%. So that's a difference of over $1,100 plus benefits. How would you anticipate covering this gap in the budget if you're trying to attract and retain excellent teachers? And in addition, because you're planning on not offering retirement until year 4.
Yeah, definitely there was some comparison between the district average rates and what the rate that we actually ended up in the application. Mr. Renna guided us to it has some information he would like to share to where the 38, how we determined to use 38 in the budget and not, as you would say, the average norm.
I think the biggest selling point that we have for teachers is the fact that they don't have to do lesson plans. They basically don't have to grade quizzes and tests because it's all done online for them. And so their workload has been reduced drastically. Some of them, the English teacher does have to read essays and stuff, but most of the quizzes and tests and all the areas are done. The curriculum is all there. They're not required to do those. They do lesson plans based on following the curriculum. So that, in my opinion, makes a difference in the amount of money being paid. It takes off some of their responsibilities off their shoulders, which allows us to offer less money. The other thing is many teachers are tired of being in the big school systems where there's hundreds of kids and you have a red button to press when you have an emergency and people come running. In our school, the school is going to be small, 125, 150 kids, small school. Everybody knows each other. It'll be a different kind of environment that some people may be looking for that type of environment and willing to accept $1,000 less for the year so they don't have to deal with those kind of things. So those are the issues that we feel that warrant or justify offering a little bit less.
But we do build a budget contingency in for maybe unknowns like that. If for some reason a line item will not cover it, we do have a built-in contingency.
Okay, thank you. Also, your Apollo Advance Loan pre-approval letter on page 545 states that personal guarantees are required to finalize the loan. I don't see any verification that sufficient assets are available or who will provide these personal guarantees. Do you have alternative financing plans as well if this doesn't work out?
I'd have to refer to the board for that.
Well, the person who got this for us was the attorney who's doing all this for free, and he was willing to do this at that time. I don't have anything in this application from him stating that he will personally guarantee this loan. So if that's something that this board would need to see, we can talk to him and get that if that's something needed. But I know at the time when he was talking to these people to get this loan, that was fine with him. He was.
And that is an updated one, and that still exists from last year. That what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that if the question is, I think your question is, what is our alternative if we don't get this loan? Correct? Is that the question that you had?
Well, who was actually planning on personally guaranteeing that, and then if that wasn't available, what would be your alternative?
Right. Okay. Well, for a fact that we know that this loan will be this loan is guaranteed. So we haven't thought that far ahead if it wasn't, but we know that it was approved last year. Mm-hmm. It was a pre-approval and it was approved this year when we went back and did it this year as well.
Right, and I believe it was this. There were the same terms as well last year.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Also, I know you talked about it and you stated on page 528 that you plan to use SFS for back office accounting, or you're going to do an RFP.
Right.
Do you have a quote to support that cost?
No, we have not provided them a quote. We put our standard beginning typical rate. Okay. We have a declining scale built on enrollment, okay. And the rate is built into the budget. We built our rate into the budget, okay. Knowing well that the RFP process is the determining factor. Schools have, a lot can happen in 18 months, and we respect the decision of the board.
Okay, all right, and I wasn't aware that would be you providing that, so and you had done the budget, so I appreciate that. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you.
Last but not least, we have section 22, the startup plan.
Actually, most of your my question had to do with the collaboration with your local business partners. You talked about that earlier. But I do have one question about that collaboration. How is that supposed to work? Are you looking for these partners to provide aid with curriculum or aid with funding or a combination of?
None of the above, actually. I mean, that could happen, and that'd be fine if it did. What we're looking for with business partners is places to put kids in jobs part-time. And that's one of the things we pride ourselves in the Fort Myers School. We've gotten lots of jobs for kids in the trades, plumbing, electrical, trucking industries, mechanical industry. They've all come to us and said, we want a good kid, someone who's clean. And we know what that means nowadays. And we'll go through our kids and say, and talk to a few of them, and you're not going to let us down, are you? And you're clean, and we make sure. And then we'll refer them to one of our partners, and they'll get a job, and they'll be working. And I had a homeless kid who lived in his car underneath the I-95, not 95, 75 on that side, and had a job now, and so he can start reaching out and doing things that he couldn't do before. And so the partnerships that we're looking for are people who will say to us, I really need somebody part-time to come in and change oil. That's all I need, oil changes done. You have somebody that can come in and we'll look at our kids and teach the principals, and we'll come up with one or two kids and suggest them to go over there, and hopefully we can get jobs for them. Because we know that if we can get jobs for these kids, we can turn their lives around. And so the more business partners we find and develop, and the more that trust us to vet these kids and make sure that they're honest and they're going to do what's right, and trustworthiness and all that kind of stuff, the better. And then we'll find jobs for them. And that really is the important thing for the business partnerships.
That's what I was hoping to hear from you.
Okay. Given all the questions that have been asked, I'll open the floor to any additional follow-up questions from our district staff. Are there any follow-up questions? Okay.
So just pertaining to what was just asked, you earlier with the CTE focus, you were talking about bringing things in the classroom that would be easy instruction with computers or what have you. And then on his question, it's based on trades. You were mentioning plumbing and things of that nature. So how would you get that student to have that type of instruction?
Sometimes we won't. Sometimes the instruction comes from the on-job training that these people are willing to give these students. And so there are many businesses out there that are looking for part-time person that they can trust, and somebody who's young and want to make a difference and help kids and help people change their lives. And so when the businesses know that's who we are and that's what we're all about, hopefully they'll come to us. And I may have a kid who loves cars. He has his own car, and he's done all the work on his own car, and somebody that we make a partnership with has a need for somebody to do oil changes. Well, that's the person I'd go to that kid and say, we're trusting you, we're putting our reputation online, getting you this job. And so it may be somebody in plumbing who's never had none of our kids have had training in plumbing, but someone says, I need someone to clean out toilets, with a breakdown, or whatever it is. And so we'll look through our kids and say, would this be something that you can do? Can we trust you? It's our reputation online. The next person down the line who looks for a job, they're going to come to us, and you need to be doing a good job, when they hire you. And so there is no correlation between the type of trades that we're offering and putting kids in jobs in the different trades. It's ideally, when we get the money and we have the enrollment, I'd like to have someone on staff that can help kids write resumes and help kids do career searches and how to find jobs. That's ideally where we get down the road when the enrollment is up and we have staff and we have support from the community and we have money in there. We can have extra people on staff. We can have math tutors and reading coaches and things like that. Those will be the ideal thing to have at this school to help these kids. And how do you go to a job interview? You know, how do you represent yourself? You know, I remember once I was the principal of a high school in Fort Lauderdale, and I interviewed somebody, and I was calling them up to ask them, you know, to come in for an interview because the resume looked good. And I got his answering machine, and it says, "I'm not here, I'm out drinking beer, call me later." He never got a call back, okay? So kids need to know, you know, what is your email address? Some people put some of the strangest, gross email address. You don't do these kind of things. So training these kids on being smart, you know, is something that we're going to be striving for.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned earlier the school in Fort Myers. What is the name of that school?
It's called Donna J. Beasley Technical Academy, DJB Technical Academy.
Okay.
That school, we were fortunate enough to have a organization of 250 businesses. It's called Tri-County Apprenticeship, TCAA. And when our kids graduate from high school, they help them get jobs in one of the trades. And then these kids are put into a program free of charge to get a master's degree in plumbing or a master's degree in electrical or a master's degree in welding. So once the kids get through the program, this organization of 250 different businesses, all the plumbers in the area, all the get jobs for these kids, and then bring them into a night school, a night program after they're working during the day to help get a master's degree in whatever the field is that they're studying in. So it'll be our goal to find those partnerships here that would really help the school.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to our district staff for your questions, and thank you so much to our applicants for helping to clarify some of the questions that we had about your application. We also commend you on your application in general. I know it's a tremendous amount of work to undergo an application of this type, and we recognize that certainly. We would like to talk a little bit about next steps at this point. The district staff will be taking the answers that you gave them and reviewing the application once again to determine their final evaluation. And that evaluation is based off of the Florida Department of Education Charter School Evaluation Instrument. And they will then be taking their recommendations forward to Mr. Russell, our superintendent. And our final in this series will be April 9th when we have the school board meeting where our school board members will be able to ask questions and a final determination will be made at that point. So that will conclude the application cycle process as dictated by statute within that 90-day period. Do you have any questions about the process, or is there anything that I can clarify for you today?
Excuse me, I'm writing that down. What time? Oh, the meeting's at night?
Actually, the meeting is starting in the morning. Oh. It will be an 8:30 start time, and we will let you know of the order that you'll be attending the meeting as well. Okay. So some follow-up will come. Okay. Where it's our attempt to try to not have late night meetings if we can avoid them, so that's why we're starting first thing in the morning.
We will get a transcript of the session today. Is that?
Yes, it will be made available. Absolutely. Okay.
Any other questions? I'd just like to, on behalf of the board, thank yourself and the staff for spending the time. It's a big document, and there's a lot of things in there, and there's certain little things that were found that were obvious. I'm glad they were found, but just please keep in mind that we're here to help and be part of the school system to help the kids in the school system. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And we will have a break until, let's see, I guess we have about just a few minutes here until 10:45 for a restroom break and a quick snack break. We will come back at 10:45 to begin with Southeast Volusia School of Science and Technology. Thank you.